ST 2016. This is interviews, music reviews, and more. This is The Hotter Show.
What is up, everybody? We are rolling on you here today in episode 327 of The Hotter Show. I hope you guys are doing absolutely fantastic. Thank you so very much for tuning in and clicking that play button on The Hotter Show. I have a kick-ass episode for you here today, and I try to every single week right here on The Hotter Show. I'm sitting down with my new buddy, Kenny Holt from the Maysides, and we have a really awesome conversation all about his love of 80s hair metal and 80s rock. A real solid discussion about kind of the greatness of that era and why he is such a fan of it and what all that music means to him. Of course, talk about influences from within that genre, and we also talk about some of his favorite records from that genre, as well as kind of the early days of his career, getting started in the touring world, joining the Maysides, a little bit about joining up with them to do some recording, and also a little bit about his upcoming solo record. So lots of ground to cover here with Kenny Holt. I hope that you guys enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, because it was a lot of fun getting to chat and have a beer with Kenny. So look forward to that. Before we jump in, I got to take a second to thank everybody for their support on last week's episode of the show, my chat with Brandon Gregory from Drop Top Alibi. Always a good time to get to catch up with Brandon, so be sure to go check that episode out and check out Drop Top Alibi's brand new song, Dill's Song, which is an absolute banger. That riff has been stuck in my head for weeks now. So don't delay. Go check it out right now, because Drop Top Alibi are a badass band who deserve your support. Big shout out again to Brandon Gregory and all the boys in Drop Top Alibi. With that out of the way, we're ready to roll into my chat with Kenny Holt from the Maysides, guitarist extraordinaire. Let's get into it. We got Kenny Holt from the Maysides here on the Hotter Show. Kenny, what's up, brother? How you doing?
How are you, buddy? You good? You all right?
I'm doing absolutely fan-freaking-tastic, man. It's good to talk with you and link up with you, man.
Yeah, man. You too. Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's always fun for me. I was telling this before we jumped on. It's always fun for me anytime someone reaches out to me and is like, hey, like, we should chat. And especially when it turns out to be someone who's, cool. Like, there's nothing, it's always a good time.
Honestly, like, my favorite thing in the world to do is drink beer and talk about music and talk to other musos. So it's just like, honestly, like, it's Tuesday night, Wednesday night. It's Tuesday night.
Whatever night it is.
Whatever night it is, let's go. Let's have a few Frosties and let's talk bollocks,
Hell yeah, man. That's what it's all about when it's cool, because so you've had a pretty interesting career the last, 10
years,
10 years or so, however long it's been.
Yeah.
We got a lot to break down, but first and foremost, just to jump into it here, what are you drinking? I got to ask.
I got an old mill on the go right now.
Oh, yeah.
But she is getting empty. So I do have a good old-fashioned JR in the wings waiting for me.
It's waiting to take over.
Yeah, exactly. I like to have diversity. So, one good lager to another good lager. Why not?
You like your lagers?
I do. I'm a lager man.
Yeah, same here. Yeah. I like my lagers and my light lagers. I get made fun of a lot for drinking light, but
yeah, no. And the good thing with light beer is you can drink like 40 of them in a night.
Yeah. So I always make the joke, like, I could literally drink 30 of these and still drive a school bus. Not that I would.
Yeah.
Let me be really clear on that. The Hotter Show does not condone drinking and driving.
No, don't.
I'm just saying.
Don't drink and drive. You'll spill your drink. That's terrible.
No. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, no, there's nothing like a good beer while you're playing guitar or talking music.
Oh, you got it. You got it. It's just, it goes along with everything, So, yeah. Anyway, here we are. Thanks for having me.
I know, man. It's an absolute pleasure. So, just jumping in head first here, what got you started with music? Where did it all start? What was some of the first music you heard? Let's dive into that.
Well, so, like, a long time ago, I grew up in London, England, or just outside of London, England. And like my mom was like pretty versatile in music. And like she would always spin, Bowie records and Springsteen and Queen and T-Rex and Thin Lizzy and that sort of thing, right? Bloody brilliant. And then, but my dad would always listen to like old school country western, like Chris Christopherson, Don Williams, Dolly Parton, that sort of thing, right? And so, I kind of had like that in the background. And then when I was, I don't know, like 10, 11, 12 at the latest and started to like get into music, I'd watch Kerrang TV over there, and I'd watch there was another rock station, I think it was called Q or something. And it was basically back in the day of when music video stations used to play music videos, right?
Right, back in the day. What a
back
concept.
in the day, right? I know it's a wild concept, right? But yeah, so back in the day when Kerrang used to play music videos constantly, I started to get like into Blink and Nirvana and some of those bands and stuff. And then one day my mom was just like so sick of hearing Linkin Park that she was just like, for God's sake, listen to Guns N' Roses and like you'll love it. And of course, me being like 11 years old, I'm like, yeah, whatever, Mom. Like, what do you know? Being a kid. And then one day I happened to fall upon Guns N' Roses. And I swear to God, like literally the moment I heard Slash play guitar, just time stopped. I was just like, you know what? I get it. Whatever he's doing, that's what I want to do. Like, that's the greatest thing ever. And it was a video for Sweet Child of Mine. Nice. So like they're all setting up and it's all black and white. There's the dog and then the band's plugging in or whatever. And then like Slash just comes up to that camera and the camera's like looking up at him. And he plugs in and he just plays one of the greatest riffs ever. And you're just like, man, that's what I want to do, So ever since then, like, it's just been hair metal and Guns N' Roses and Rat Records. And I'm just like, man, like, let's go. Let's play rock and roll,
That's fucking sweet. Well, it's cool because like Slash, I was about to say was, but I mean, he still is to this day. Like, I love his stuff with Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators, right? Like, I love all the stuff he does.
They just released a record like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. And it's, I haven't checked it out yet. I'm pretty behind on music overall, but like, right. I've heard it's fantastic from what everyone said. And I mean, he's a beast and, he's such a distinctive player, right? Like, I would listen to some old timers, from my days in the music store talk about Slash, and they'd be like, "Oh, he's not even that good of a technical player." And I'm like,
but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, like
it doesn't matter. Like you can listen to John Petrucci and you can go like, man, like that guy can really play guitar and like he's incredible and every note is perfect. But man, like it's almost subhuman at that point. Like just Slash, just bend a note and it's just it just gets me going. Like.
There's players like him who, I mean, he has the riffs, he can write killer solos, and he can say more with one note than most guitar players can with 100, right? Like that's, 100%, he's one of those 100%, players.
100%. And so it was Slash and Guns N' Roses that kind of got me onto the train that I'm on. But then you've only got to listen to Guns N' Roses for 5 minutes before you know who Motley Crue are. Right. And then you've only got to listen to Motley Crue for 2.5 minutes before you know who Skid Row are. And then it just kind of transcended into this thing where I'm like the only person that I know that loves hair metal as much as I do. Like I can put on a Firehouse record and be stoked. I can be like, yes, man, Firehouse is awesome. Nobody else is listening to Firehouse today,
Just like, I don't even know who Firehouse are.
Oh, they got a couple of bangers. They got a couple of bangers.
See, I'm not a big hair metal guy. That's always been like, it's not that I don't enjoy it. Just like, I don't have much education aside from the obvious bands,
Oh, for sure. But like bands like Winger and Kix and Black and Blue and oh man, there's so many Foster Pussycat, LA Guns. Like there's so many good hair metal bands where you're like, they're genuinely great bands, and some of them have some of the best guitar players ever. I mean, like, I don't like them, but Extreme has Nuno Bettencourt, right? Unbelievable, right? Damn Yankees had Ted Nugent. That was incredible. Danger had Andy Timmons, who's a beast on guitar. So it's just like, man, like we have so many great guitar players playing in, and they were playing cheesy music and wearing zebra print pants, but man, like that's what the era was, it was the best.
That's it. So when you moved over from England in 2003, when you moved over, was that scene still pretty popular over here? Was it different? Like how did it look with music?
Yeah, it was never popular. I mean, it was never even really that popular in England. So like I was an outcast like at school. Like, I mean, I got made fun of at school constantly because I was just like, everybody was listening to like Linkin Park, Hyper Theory.
Right. Yeah. That's the music of the age.
Yeah, but have you heard fucking Too Fast for Love by Motley Crue? Like, this is way better, Yeah, hey man, that car, that cowbell sounds like a car fender. Yeah, that's awesome. Wicked. It sounds terrible. It's wicked. But then like when I moved here, like I moved here at like a pivotal age, like I was 15. So like it was a tough age to move because like I had like being 15, like I had all my friends groups over there, and then to try to come into friends groups when you're like 15, 16 over here is kind of a tough ask. And I think like now looking back at it, now that I'm 33, 34 or whatever I am, I do look back at those 3 or 4 years at high school and I was just like, man, like I was really isolated. And one of the things that always kept me comfort was rap records and finding the next, tough record and the next Dokken B-side, and I'm just like, man, like, there's some bloody good songs here, Then I'd sit down and just play guitar and then try to emulate them. And, that was that. That's how I spent my high school years.
Right. Were you a fan of like the kind of some of the more, I guess like the bands like the Def Leppard and stuff who were kind of like more of like the poppy side of hair metal, or did you not?
Yeah, I mean, I like it all, but what, Def Leppard's a weird one for me. Yeah, I mean, I love Poison. Don't get me wrong. Like,
I mean, come on.
They're as cheesy as they get, but you gotta love it. But Def Leppard's always a weird one for me, and I'm gonna throw you a curveball about Def Leppard in a second. But Def Leppard is always that band to me that it never really fit in the new wave of British heavy metal, right. But they definitely don't fit in the hair metal scene. They've always kind of been like at arm's length with every kind of movement that was going on, and they've always kind of just done their own thing, right? And I kind of respect that. But then here's the thing about Def Leppard that I really, really like. There is not a cover band on the face of the earth that can do a good Def Leppard cover. It's impossible.
You're right.
It's impossible. You can't cover Def Leppard. And I don't know whether it's because of the guitar tone or the production of the record or Joe Elliott's voice or whatever, but you can't cover Def Leppard. It's like it must be a rule in the universe that I'm not aware of.
It's one of the 10 commandments of rock. Thou shalt not cover Pour Some Sugar on Me. Like,
yeah, exactly. Like, not even at karaoke bars, because you're definitely not doing it good at karaoke.
Yeah. Now that I think about it, I've never heard anyone even do a karaoke version of any of their songs or anything. Let me throw a curveball back at you. The only good cover I have heard of a Def Leppard song was Photograph.
Okay.
It was by, it was on, okay, hang on. I got to think here for a second. So it was on Santana did this record.
Okay.
And I was obsessed with this record when I was younger. It was like a cover record he did.
Okay.
And it was Santana playing guitar, obviously, with his band. Then a bunch of singers come in and do vocals.
Yep.
And there was a cover of Photograph on there that he did, if I'm remembering this correctly. And Chris Daughtry from Daughtry did vocals on it.
Okay.
It's different. He didn't try and sound like it doesn't sound like Def Leppard. It sounds like, and I'm like, I heard it and I was like, you know what? Not bad.
Okay. All right. I'll have to find it and give it a go after this.
Yeah.
And I'll report back. We'll do part 2 and I'll report back on my findings.
I'm looking this up because I gotta make sure. I'm like 90% positive it was the Santana record, because I got a report on this if I'm going to do this here. He did it was like a cover record, and it was such a left field kind of thing, because I was like, well, like Santana's doing a cover record, like what the fuck? And he comes out with a bunch of bangers. It was called Guitar Heaven, the greatest guitar classics of all time. And yes, this is it. So it was, Photograph featuring Chris Daughtry. And it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Okay.
Like, it's not like, it won't change your life or anything, but like it's pretty good.
Yeah, all right. Okay, I'll give it a go. I'll put that on there, to listen to list. So, yeah.
Well, that's it, man. Well, that's what's so fun. Like looking at that kind of music, like, even though I've never been super heavily into it, like I have such a respect for what a lot of those artists did. And a lot of them, like, I mean, you look at a band like Motley Crue, like the guitar tone that Motley Crue was using back in the 80s is like modern metal, like the guitar tone, like just, oh my God.
I think they were all ahead of the curve. Like, I genuinely think, and I mean, like, obviously, like, you know, I mean, even if you want to go so far as, not that Megadeth, sorry, was hair metal, but like, you know, the production value on Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good is god awful. But it was the production value on Blizzard of Oz is god awful, you know, and same with Too Fast for Love. But you got to respect it because it's like, man, like they had $3 to their name and they spent $2.72 of it on the production of the record. You know, like, let's get this thing out there so we can buy more drugs. You know,
pretty much. Like, you got to respect that hustle.
The motivation. Like, you know, there was no other way, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's what's so funny. Like, it's that the party scene that was happening around that time and with some of these musicians. And like, I mean, unfortunately, you know, some of them, you know, didn't make it, or some of them were, yeah, for sure. Yeah. But like, there's some just super obscure hair metal bands that are just like, you hear it and it's like, wow, these guys are badass. Like, and then there's bands that were hair metal that turned into different kinds of bands, like a Pantera who started off as
I was just going to say Pantera, because that was it Shout It Out Loud, or was their first Pantera's first record?
Let's look it up. Record. I can't remember the name of it.
I believe it was Plantenko. Was the name of the band.
You may,
and yeah, they. It was Shout It.
Metal Magic was the first record.
Okay, all right. Maybe I'm thinking of the second one. I can't. It's been a minute since I listened to Pantera, but isn't it 28 years since they released Vulgar Display of Power?
It's a great question.
I think it was 28 years today, actually.
February 25th.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
so you're a month off, but close enough. It's 25 years this year.
That's pretty crazy.
Pretty freaking cool. That's a badass record. That's more my shit. Like the.
Okay. All right.
Like, well, actually, that's not true. More the 2000s.
Okay.
My shit.
You big Lamb of God fan?
I wasn't until I was an adult.
Okay.
I used to hate death metal, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Screaming of any. I was into like, dude. I was a new metal guy. Okay. I was like a post grunge guy, you know. Yeah. So that was my shit.
That's all right. Hey.
I never like. I think there was a quote from. Shit. Don't remember. But it's talking about how like grunge basically derailed hair metal and all the stuff. Like, I'm a big grunge fan, right? So like,
it was the worst. Yeah, grunge, like Nirvana just ruined hair metal for me. You know, Nirvana happened, and then Tough and Danger didn't. So I was like, well, you know, that sucks. You know.
Yeah. So if you had to pick like a couple of bands and a couple of records that like you really truly love from that era, do you have a couple? Can you give me a top 5, or is it like picking?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Appetite for Destruction is number 1, right?
Of course, yeah.
Like it's got to be the greatest record ever. Skid Row by Skid Row. That's got to be in the top 5. This is in no particular order. From 2 to 5 is in no particular order because AFD is obviously number 1. I would go to say Girls. Motley Crue has got to be in there.
Respectable. Like, okay.
Pretty definitive record. I would say. I know I'm going to have a lot of outliers here. I would say that like Danger's first record is a definitive one because, man, like that's a bloody good record. Like that's a good record. And yes, it's cheesy and there's synth and it exploits every amount of cheese possible in the 80s. But Danger has got to be up there. And then, I mean, like, let's throw a Rat record in there. I mean, Out of the Cellar's a good one. Dancing Undercover, Shame, 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 Invasion of Your Private. I mean, any Rat record, they all sound the bloody same. So, I mean, just pick a Rat record and it's going to be in there.
Pick one and that's going to be in the
just
top
pick
5,
one.
right?
Yeah. That's that's that.
That's awesome. Now, you had mentioned a little earlier how like before you got into the hair metal and stuff, you would like listen to like Linkin Park and shit like that.
Yeah.
Did you ever go back to that kind of music, or has it just been nope? It's just hair metal all throughout.
Well, I mean, you can't say that like no, it's just been hair metal because like I mean, I love country music. Like I love country music because like the melodies and the songwriting in country music is just incredible. And I sang a few operas actually at some point about 10 years ago as well. Like I have a hard time with like going back to like the Linkin Parks and Nirvanas and stuff because like Hypertheory was great, right?
Yeah.
And then the second one was cool. But then what happened with the Jay-Z album? Like what was going on with that? Like nobody asked for that. There was nobody that woke up one day and was just like, you know what we should do? We should have a Linkin Park record that Jay-Z half raps over and then reproduces, and then we should listen to that. Like nobody asked for that.
It's just funny you said that because like I remember when that record came out, and a lot of people of my generation were like losing their shit because it's just like like you're not like I'm 30, so like but that. Like I found talking to people who are like a couple years older than me.
Yep.
Like there's a big difference there. I don't know what it is when it comes to music. It's interesting. Like it's just like I remember when that came out, I was like, "Yo, what? Like what did they do? They remixed a bunch of stuff. Like what? Oh my god!"
I will say one band that's always stuck with me, and I mean, like obviously, like Maysides, it sounds like Blink-182, and you can hear the influence of Maysides,
sure,
in through and out, right? But one band that always stuck with me is always stuck one because yes, they came out as like the pop punk, but then they've really like Sum 41's done a really good job of maintaining that pop punk esque sound, but then they've gone super, super heavy.
Hell yeah.
And like really bloody heavy. Like 13 Voices was dark. Out for Blood, that was bloody dark. Chuck was dark.
Screaming Bloody Murder.
Yeah, and I mean, like, that one that
was more punky. Like, that was an interesting record.
Yeah,
I like that record, but like, I get it.
Yeah, like that one to me is the absolute that's possibly the weakest Sum album. But like, if you release the weakest Sum album and you're 6 albums deep, like, I mean, you've done pretty good.
Yeah, right.
One, right. So, I mean, and then to come back with 2 absolute bangers, like, I mean, you're doing something right.
Yeah. They just needed that Brown sound, man.
Well, like, that guy's phenomenal. Like, he's a phenomenal songwriter, phenomenal guitar player. Like, he knows what's going on. So, yeah.
Definitely. So it's interesting because, like, talking about obviously, going the transition from hair metal and stuff like that into punk, like, you still hear, like, listening to the Maysides stuff that you've been on, like, clearly, like, you can hear your influence in there. You can hear like. So are you playing lead and stuff like that for the Maysides or?
It depends on like most of the records, like Matt and I will divvy up the leads and the rhythms and that sort of thing, especially for the live show too, because like depending on what we're doing in the show or whatever will dictate kind of like who plays what. But I mean for the most part, like Matt will send out a skeleton of a song. And then, like we'll all put our own spins on things and, we come to a rehearsal or whatever and we'll say like, hey, why don't we try it like this? Why don't we like do a halftime here? Why don't I do this? I'll do a key change here or, we'll, we kind of play around with it. Right. So.
Right. Cause your guys' stuff, it definitely like there's no denying it's punk rock. Like there's no denying that, but also to me, I can hear like, I'm listening to a guitar solo and I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I hear that. Okay. I hear it a little bit. Like, what I mean?
Yeah, there's a little bit of it in there for sure. It's got to keep me fresh while I'm on stage,
Of course. Yeah. You can't just be playing power chords the whole time. It get really boring.
No, I'll get very bored very quickly.
Nothing against my homies out there who just play power chords the whole time, but
hey man, if that's
see, I love that shit. So
you know what? Like, here's the thing though. Like, if somebody's gonna if that's what the song calls for, then that's what the song calls for, right? Like, if it's just a Ramones song, like, you're never gonna tell the Ramones to do anything different because that's never what you want. You know, you want to listen to a Ramones record, and it sounds like a bloody Ramones record. You know, and that's the point of the Ramones,
right? It's just like sometimes you don't need to, like when you have just a killer riff or killer chord progression, you don't need to, let's add 6 leads to this. It's like, why?
No.
Let's add a bunch of background stuff. Like, why? Like,
less is always more. Less is always more. So, like, just leave it the way that it is, and if that chord progression is just literally 3 power chords with a thumping drum beat, let's go,
There's nothing like it sometimes, right? Like when you hear just a good riff and a good beat and you can just bop your head to it. And then next thing you know, there's a chorus hook that gets stuck in your head. It's like, that's a beautiful fucking thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Look at American Idiot by Green Day. I mean, like, that's literally 3 power chords. Like, that whole song is 3 chords. And it's just like, man, like, the song thumps, like, it doesn't need anything else.
Yeah, if there was a bunch of stuff added into that song, like, just wouldn't make sense.
Nuno Betancourt doesn't need to be on American Idiot,
No. Nuno Betancourt. What a guy. Let's go back to guitar players for a second. So for you, like, obviously you mentioned Slash is kind of your guy. Do you have any other ones that, like, you kind of can pinpoint that really influenced you? Or
I mean, Angus Young. Man, like, you know what? Everybody always gives AC/DC all the time, but I'm going to tell you something right now. AC/DC songs are a lot more complex than most people think that they are.
Yeah.
Right? And not only that, man, like, if, Whole Lot of Rosie is essentially 1 chord progression. But, man, have you ever listened to Whole Lot of Rosie at 100 volume, like 100% volume? It rips, man. Like, there's nothing quite like it. So why make it more confusing than it needs to be? Just play that A chord and just pull off with the C and the D. And that's all you need. Like, Angus Young has always been there. Slash has always been there. David Gilmour, funnily enough, because I always talk about less being more. David Gilmour has got to be one of the greatest. Like, he's got to be one of the greatest. I mean, Brian May too. He's got to be one of the bloody greatest. Snake Sabo from Skid Row there. Like, he's way up there. So, I mean, there's anybody that's bloody brilliant. New music, though, aside from 80s hair metal. I mean, Lindsay Ell, she's a country artist from Calgary that now lives in Nashville. She's unbelievably good on guitar. So, I mean, like, it depends on, like, I don't know, it depends on the mood or the song or whatever. But, like, like, there's some brilliant guitar players out there. And everybody that's watching, every musician that's watching another musician can learn something always.
Oh, for sure.
Like, always. So, yeah, it's bloody brilliant.
I always say that to people. Like, when you speak, like, I happen to know some very talented people, some of which I found on the podcast, and, like, speaking with them, it's like, especially off mic, like, they'll talk about, this person, and, like, it blows my mind when they do this or whatever. And I'm like, you're already, like, the best guitar player I've ever seen. And you're telling me that, like, this guy humbles me. And I'm like, really? Like, it just, when you talk with really talented people, I find that that's the attitude. It's like, well, what can I learn from this person? Like, let me watch 100%. This. Doesn't matter if it's a bar band and they're playing covers for 2 hours. Like, they're watching, I'll be at the bar with the boys and my one buddy he plays in a kind of bar band and stuff. And, like, he'll be watching really closely and I'll be like, he's, like, critiquing or something. And he's like, I never thought of playing that song that way.
Yeah.
I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, watch what he's doing here with that. And I'm just like, I don't get it. And he's like, just like real musicians, like, they pay attention to that kind of shit.
I know. And, like, even when it just comes to, like, bending or sliding a note or something, a half a tone or a semitone or something, like, just And case in point, I mean, like we were just recording, me and some of the boys were just recording on the weekend just gone. And like Ryan has his setup and his tone, and I have my setup and my tone. And I was just trying something and I was warming up. And, like case in point, I plugged my guitar through Ryan's rig and I played a couple of things. And you can really tell that like the tone of the guitar comes through the player because like honestly, like my setup, my guitar sounded very different to Ryan's guitar through the same rig, through the same preamps, through the same mic, through the same amp, everything. And it really just comes down to like, how does that player play? And like, yeah, I mean, like I say, just something as simple as like sliding to or bending up a note, a semitone or a tone or something. And you're just like, man, like you say, like, oh, I never thought to play it that way. Well, like there's 1,000 ways to play the same AC/DC riff, and Angus Young is going to play it differently to Slash, who's going to play it differently to me or whatever. Like there's just nuances everywhere, right? So like, it's the best. It's the best.
It can be something as simple as like, like I'm a huge fan. Like I'm a huge Jerry Cantrell fan. I'm a huge Alice in Chains fan.
Yep.
And watching Alice in Chains play Angry Chair without Lane Staley, obviously vocally it sounds completely different, obviously. Yep. But even like guitar, like Lane would play guitar on that song, and that is such a brutally simple droning guitar riff. But like Lane wasn't a great guitar player, but the way he played that riff, it just sounded so interesting. And watching them play it live, like Duval, who's a new vocalist, he's been in the fucking band for like well over 10 years now. But the way he plays, like he's such a great player, he plays it so clean. And I'm watching going, this doesn't sound right to me. Like, it sounds different to me.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, I can hear that. Okay. It's just the way he's playing it. Right. Like there's so many guys like, I can plug into my buddy's rig with his guitar and it'll just sound different.
Oh, 100%. And I mean,
like
case in point, when we were recording on the weekend, I have a riff that we wrote a song around or whatever, but the way that I play the riff to the way that Ryan plays the riff, even though it's the same riff, sounds completely different. Mm-hmm. But on the record, one's panned left, one's panned right. So like cut down the middle, it sounds bloody wicked together. But if you listen to the two isolated tracks, they sound like a completely different riff. And it's the same notes, it's the same timing, it's the same everything. It's just the nuance in that guitar player and like how they accent that riff or how they're up, down, up strum, down strum sort of thing. Like it's just all in the nuance.
It's especially when you're recording, like you really see that kind of stuff. Where like, even like I can remember back in the January with my buddy and we had this one riff and I would slide and to play it, right?
Yep.
He was always like, why would you do that? Like play it like, just like a hammer on riff. And I'm just like, nah, man, it needs that. And like we ended up recording it both ways. And like you're saying, we pan one left, pan one right. Yep. And then we just went, okay, that sounds fucking awesome. Like it's just something so small to the average person. Like they're like, sounds the exact same. It's like, no, man, like it's a completely different riff.
It's bloody different. It's a completely different riff. So, but it's fucking awesome. And sorry for swearing, but like you can always learn. You can always learn from another guitar player, and that's why I love playing with different bands, and that's why I've done so much in the past because like there's so much to learn out there. Like. Whether it's country riffs or whether it's bloody, new metal riffs or whether it's heavy metal riffs or something, there's always something that somebody can learn and somebody can bring to the table,
Right. So, well, let's just dive into that. So when exactly did you start playing guitar and when did you start like really getting serious with it?
I think I started playing guitar about a week, legitimately, like a week or two after I discovered who Guns N' Roses were.
Nice.
Right? And, and so my dad brought me like a Squier Strat, and he's just like, well, I'm going to give you a guitar, but you got to take lessons and stuff. And so I took lessons in England, and, like I knew 3 chords. So we had a band when I was in England, and we were we must have been terrible. Like there was no way that the band was good, right? But then from there, when I moved to Canada, like I didn't have anybody to play with in high school, and I was like extremely isolated. So I kind of stopped playing for a few years, but then I don't know, like in my gotta be early 20s, early 20s, ended up picking up guitar again because I never lost the love for music. I was just never able to jam with anybody or anything, right? And so yeah, then I ended up doing this acoustic gig for a while where we were doing acoustic covers. And then somewhere along the line, you know, we were writing our own music as well. And then somewhere along the line, I ended up in a country rock band and touring Ontario and the East Coast. And then I was also at the same point in time, like in a heavy metal band, and we were writing a record. You know, and then, oh man, and then the tours just never stopped. And then like the phone calls just never stopped coming in. So it was kind of like a very natural progression in a sense, I guess. But it was also like one of those things where I was just like, man, like I don't feel like I'm a great guitar player. Even to this day, I don't feel like I'm a great guitar player, but I'll learn the set. We'll just go on tour and we'll figure it out. And that's always just been my mentality.
And it's also very important. I learned this from a touring tech who's been touring for years, and he's been with tons and tons of different bands. He said to me, he says, you know, one of the most important things that you can learn as a touring musician if you want to be successful. He says, what's that? He says, obviously you got to be a good player in some regard. That's obviously very important. But he says, you got to be a good hang.
Yeah, that's the key.
You got to be a good dude or dudette. Yeah. You gotta he's like, there's nothing I can stand less than when someone comes on our crew and they're just not a good hang. It just, they can be great at their job. It doesn't matter. If you're just, you know, it's one thing if you're like quiet and you keep to yourself for the first few months, that's different. But like, if you're just an asshole, it's like, come on, man.
100%. Man, that's cardinal rule number one. Like that is number one testament of being in a band. You have to be a good hang. And like, there's always going to be somebody out there that's better than you at playing your instrument. You got to remember that, right? Like Yngwie Malmsteen is still alive. So like, I don't stand a chance of being the greatest guitar player ever. But like, honestly, man, like that's cardinal rule number one. You have to be a good hang. You have to be a good dude. And dude is non-binary.
Yes,
you know?
Right. Yeah.
Right. You got to be a good dude or a good dudette or whatever, but you got to be a good hang. Like nobody wants to hang around with just the worst kind of person. And like you say, like, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Like you could be the most amazing guitar player ever, but like, man, like just be humble and be cool and just kind of hang out. And, you know, like nobody wants to hang around the assholes and like, that's it, you know?
It's funny. I remember watching, this is on topic, but super random. I remember watching, I think it was a concert DVD interview type thing for Pink, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
And we love Pink over here in this household. And, she was talking because like her band is like, her live band, some of the best musicians in the game. Like they're all amazing. And I remember she was talking about like after the show, she was talking about something, and like I think it was her bass player was like so upset because she like she just had a really bad night, right?
Yeah.
And I remember like she just like looked at her and like grabbed her by the head, and she was like, "I love you. You are in my family. That's why you're here, not because you're a great player, but like." I have you out here because my kids are out here and we're all a family. And like, that's why you're here. Don't make any mistake about it. If you were, I could have anyone, it's like even her guitar player, he's one of the best, I can't remember his name, but he's the guy who plays on played on like American Idol and all that shit.
Of course. Yeah.
That guy. So like he could do whatever he wants.
Yeah.
He's treated so well. Like it's just like I'm gonna go play for Pink. It's fine, like you know.
And you know what? And those session guys, man, they know what they're doing. Like you know, whether they're bass, drums, guitar, piano, whatever. Like, man, some of those session guys and girls, they really know their stuff.
Yeah.
You
It's
know?
like you think you're good. I remember a good friend of mine. He went to Nashville for the first time with some friends of his, and he's like he's an amazing player, amazing vocalist, great guy. He came back, and I was like, "Also, how's Nashville?" And he's just like, "Dude, I suck." I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "There was this kid there who was like 5 years younger than me, and he's a session player,
Yeah.
and this dude just." Like he's like I just put my guitar away.
Yeah,
I was like, I'm not even gonna play in front of this guy. Like, just I'm done.
Oh, and I mean, some of those songwriting. I mean, because as you probably very well know, but most country country music songs that are on the radio, they're all written by songwriting groups.
Yes,
and, like Luke Bryan will take a tune, and then like Blake Shelton will take a tune or whatever. But some of these songwriting groups, man, like, they'll bust out 200 songs in a week. You're like, man, like, I haven't written 200 songs in my life.
And they'll all be hits.
Yeah, I know. Let alone like 200 songs that will all be number one at some point. Like, it's bloody crazy. They really know what they're doing. And I mean, like, credit to them. I mean, Morgan Wallen just announced that his album, what's it called? Dangerous, I think it was. That spent more time in the Billboard 200 than any other country album ever.
Really?
And that was announced like this week. Yeah. That's the most successful country music album of all time. And he probably didn't write a single lick.
Yeah.
So,
which is so interesting about it, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's such a weird dynamic. But you know what, man? Like, good on him. Because he's selling out Madison Square Garden. And I'm not. So, you know what? Good on him,
I remember like back in the day, I used to be very much like, oh, what do you mean they don't write their own songs? Like, oh, what posers, And like, I think it was an interview I saw with, it was with Elton John. And like, you look at Elton John, I mean,
one of the best.
Couldn't write a song to save his fucking life. And he'll tell you that, you know? And like, he didn't need to.
Like, who did he have? Bernie Mac was right.
Yeah, Bernie Mac, like one of the greatest songwriters of all time, and like obviously, a huge respect to people who can do that, because there are some people too that like, like they say, like, hey, I'd love to hire a songwriter to write me hits, but like, I don't feel like I can perform it. I can be happy with it. Like, there's an art form to singing someone else's words and
100%
doing it justice, right?
I mean, Annie Lennox never wrote one of her own tunes,
right?
I mean, fuck, she's a household name.
Mm-hmm. Anne Murray.
Sorry, not Annie Lennox. That's the one I meant.
Okay, I was going to say, Anne Murray never wrote a song. I mean, there's a Family Guy bit about it, for God's sakes. Yeah. Like, she never didn't write a song, just never wrote a song in her whole career. Look at her. Like,
credit to Annie Lennox. I don't know what her songwriting credits are. She's probably amazing.
Oh, probably. I don't know who that is, but shut up.
If Annie Lennox is listening, I do send my apologies.
Come on the show. We'll chat. We'll talk about it.
Absolutely. You can slander me all day long.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
That's fantastic. But so once you got out of high school, the early 20s, you started kind of getting more serious. You did some tours. What was that like in kind of the early days of your touring life? Because it sounds like you kind of like went on the road and kind of sort of didn't really come back for a while.
Yeah, it was crazy, man. Like, I kind of got the call, I don't know, playing a couple of bands or whatever back in 2012, 2013 or something. And it was kind of like one of those progression things where like I get a call and I, essentially be a session musician for a tour. And then, that one tour would just lead into the next one, which would lead into the next one or whatever. And I think in 2013, I ended up playing like 120 or 130 shows between like 5 different bands or something.
Holy shit.
So like, and most of those were away. So it wasn't like I was playing at, Scorecard Harry's in bloody Port Lucie or something. Like, I was like away. I was in Ottawa and Belleville and the East Coast and this, that, and the other thing. So like, it got pretty crazy. It got pretty hairy. But yeah, you know what, man, like that's kind of where I really learned my chops, of playing in a band. And so, Then 2013 or whatever it was worked into 2014, which worked into 2015. And yeah, like the tours just never stopped because you kind of always, you have this natural instinct where you're like, okay, like playing the Vans Warped Tour was really cool, but how do we do better than that? Like, what do we do next? Like what's the next thing or whatever? And so, it was just like one of these things that was just like, man, like let's just keep this train rolling.
Right. When it's happening, it's like, I want to keep doing this while I can, right?
For
like
sure.
it's like you almost don't want to, like, if I say no to a gig, like, will I get a call again?
Yeah, no, well, and not only that too, like, man, like when the momentum is with the band, like
Right.
like that's when you got to keep it going. Like if you're able to get momentum and traction in a project or something, and people are showing up to shows and you're selling T-shirts and shit, and people are phoning you out there, from here to Timbuktu or whatever, it's just like, man, yeah, we'll do that gig. Absolutely. Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, okay. You want to drive to Charlottetown? All right, sure. I guess I'll go to Prince Edward Island, and you keep you just keep it going. And I mean, that said, 2013, we were all 10 years younger. We were all 10 years thinner. We were all 10 years, this was all pre, band members having children and stuff. So like right now it's a bit of a different dichotomy, but you still kind of roll with the punches and we figure everything out.
Right. Yeah. There's obviously now, there's a lot more to take into consideration. So in 2013, was that when you first started playing with the Maysides?
Basically, yeah. Yeah. Like they released the first record, Evicted, with the original guitar player. And then, I don't know, like he didn't show up to a gig or didn't want a gig anymore or something after the record was up. So I got the call to come in and kind of finish the run of shows that they had towards the end of 2013. And then because I got I had at the time so many connections with, venues and festivals and all the rest of it, I just ended up booking the band more and more shows. And so then suddenly I just ended up being in the band. And yeah, it's literally just gone on for 9 years. It's like a marriage that won't end,
9-10 years later, you're just like, holy shit.
Yeah, well, that was a thing, now we're just old and fat, nobody likes us. So, like, let's just continue going with it, So, could be worse.
Slugging it out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's be honest, like, I'm a bit heavier than I used to be, and so is Mike, but it is what it is. We do genuinely really like what we're doing, and we all, have a deep found love and respect for each other and all the rest of it. So, we all joke about all of this sort of thing, but at the end of the day, like, we're the greatest of mates, like the 3 or 4 of us or whatever, like we're just the tightest of mates. And that's what the best part is. It's like when you tour and you play with other bands and you do all these festivals and stuff, like honestly, some of the best parts of it all isn't the actual act of being on stage or doing the show. It's hanging out with literally your mates that you may have not seen in 6 months or a year or 2 years or whatever, because just tours haven't aligned or things are crazy or something, right? So
it's the hanging out.
That's it. You got to be a good hang.
Got to be a good hang, man.
You got to be a good hang.
Good hang with everybody.
That's it.
Not just the guys in your band. Yeah.
Absolutely. You got to be a good bloody hang, and the band's got to be a good hang, because if the band's not a good hang, then guess what? Then they're not hanging with anybody else.
Then you're just sitting around and you're just like, oh man, I wonder what the guys in this band are doing. It's like, oh, they went to a bar or something. It's like, oh, we didn't get the invite. It's like, you guys aren't a good hang.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? So yeah, you gotta be a good hang. That's rule number 1. It's commandment number 1. Like you gotta be a good hang. Like that's it.
That's fantastic. Well, that's awesome. And I mean, like with the Maysides, like, I guess the most recent thing you guys have done, like, you dropped Any Girl in 2020. Obviously, the last couple of years have been to say the least, a little bit of a shit show. So maybe, but it's a fantastic song. I love the solo in it. I don't know if you played that solo, but if
I didn't play that solo, but
okay, I like all the stuff, but I thought it's a great song, and it was a very, to me, it struck me because the solo is it's very soulful for a punk rock solo, and I'm like, that's cool. I like that.
Well, when that song came about, like, I don't know, when did Loved and Lost come out? 15 or something? 2015?
Yeah, it's 2015.
Right, yeah. So like that song has been around since 2015. So like when that song came out, like originally, like it was literally just the power chords on the verses and the choruses and stuff. And I'm like, man, we gotta have something more than that. So that's when like I added that riff of the, very Beach Boysy, very Teenage Head sort of and like that's kind of like, that's kind of what gives it that drive or whatever. So like like that one's been out for a while. But we do another single coming now that the world is open and we can play shows and stuff. And this is kind of why we've been quiet, because it's just like, what are we going to do? Like release a single and then do like an online Zoom concert? Like nobody's going to watch that. Like nobody
it's
cares.
Tricky.
Like,
it's hard. It was painful. Like I respect the hell out of the bands that did stuff like that because they're trying.
Yeah, for
like
sure.
I also get bands that just kept quiet. I really do.
Yeah,
understand.
I just kind of like, I don't know, man. Like I wasn't into it, so we just kind of stay quiet. But now that the world is open and like things are moving forward and stuff, we do have another music video film, another single's coming out, records coming out. I mean, we got some shows in June with some buddies from the East Coast here in town and around and stuff. And we're releasing our own beer and stuff. So like, there's lots happening. It's just bloody exciting to kind of get back to it,
That's badass, man. Oh, I got to go back there for a second because I got to ask about two things. Number one, the beer.
Yes.
What's that about? You guys are dropping a beer? I need to know more about this.
Well, we have a song on the last record called Good Old Days. So we linked up with a brewery and we're releasing a good old hazy IPA.
Nice.
So that's going to be bloody fantastic. That's going to be available at our June shows. And then from there, I mean, it was like one of those things, right? Like we were all delinquents. We just like drinking beer and having fun. So I was like, man, like what's the best thing that we could ever do merch-wise? I was like, well, it's either release our own Clone Willy dildos or release the beer, right? And I was like, and, three of the other guys are married, so the old Clone Willy dildos was kind of off the table. So I was like, well, let's just release our own beer then,
I guess we'll do beer then.
I guess we'll do beer, I mean, we'll leave the dildos to Rammstein and we'll just do beer, It's kind of, second
hazy IPA. I'm for it. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to check that out.
It's good. It's bloody good beer. You know what? And we're releasing them in 500 ml bottles because I don't like to fuck around.
Yeah, that's it, man. Have a few of those and you're going to be laughing.
Absolutely. If I could just sell them in growlers, I'd be keen. But, like the LCBO kind of frowns upon that. So,
yeah.
So
we're not a fan of the growlers.
Well, they're not a fan of just like, what's the term? Like overindulgence. So,
Yes.
So, but I am, anything that's worth doing in my book, if anything that's worth doing in my book is worth overdoing. Like excess is best where I come from. So, the 80s.
Of course, yeah.
Well, I mean, Rat did it excessively. He's like a big thing to do, Why would you not?
That's it. Well, I mean, that's badass, man. I'm excited. I actually really like hazy IPAs too. So that's cool. They're not quite as bitter as a full-on IPA. They're kind of like a nice medium.
Yeah.
That's cool. Okay.
Well, we'll bring you down to the show, and you can drink 100 beers, and we can do an interview at the show as well.
Holy shit! That's not. We'll talk. But then as far as the record, is there anything you can talk about right now for the record to kind of hype up, or are you guys still kind of an early?
No, like the record's been done for ages.
Oh, right
like,
on. Okay.
Yeah, like I mean, it's literally been done since pre-COVID, but then like COVID hit, and then it was just like, well, we're not going to release a record in the middle of COVID. So like, yeah, the record's kind of done, and we're already at the stage of like writing the next one. Right. So like, it's kind of like, like it's kind of ready to go. I mean, like, look, the next Maysides record sounds like a Maysides record because, like, when AC/DC released Power Up last year, I didn't need to listen to it to know that it sounded like an AC/DC record, right? Like there is a certain brand and a certain je ne sais quoi that comes with a Maysides record. It sounds like the Maysides, and we're not going to go Dream Theater on it. And we're not going to get experimental. And we're not going to get, whatever. It just sounds like, 6 pop punk songs that, decent quality songs that have a decent positive message. And, we're still the same guys that we were when we were 21. We still like drinking beer and we still like playing guitar, still like tits, like everything's good,
There's nothing better.
That's that, why overcomplicate it,
Yeah, that's it. That's a recipe for a good day.
Exactly.
Let's be real about it. That's fantastic. Well, and you mentioned too that you were recording this past weekend as we're recording this. What were you working on this past weekend?
This weekend just gone. I'm actually doing my own solo record as well.
Nice.
Because here's the thing, as I just said with Maysides, like there's a certain je ne sais quoi that goes along with it. And I'm a lover of Guns N' Roses and Rat and Dokken records and stuff. And I'm just like, so I'm drawn to kind of writing those sorts of songs. And yeah, it was like one of those things, like I've written all of these songs about, my personal struggles with certain things and things that have happened in my life. And they were naturally more 80s hair metal oriented. And so, I kind of took them to the table and the guys were like, well, listen, yes, they're great songs. Yes, they sound awesome, but they're not Mayside songs. So I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to put it out there regardless of, Maysides and whatever else. And I'm just going to see where it takes me, and if I get 100 streams on Spotify, amazing. If I get 1 million streams on Spotify, then amazing. I'm quite literally going to release the record. There's going to be music videos and there's going to be proper production and it's not going to be a full-on proper release. But I quite literally have zero expectations with it. And if that takes off, amazing. If it doesn't, well, then you know what? I put a killer rock and roll record out there. And, and that was always the goal. There's no bollocks with my records. There's like, because I'm very drawn to like old school punk as well. So like Casualties records and Ramones and stuff. And like those records, like, man, there was no take two. It was just get it right the first time, play the damn thing, and then let's go to CBGBs, So like for me, like that's how we recorded it. It was literally 3-4 guys in a room, press record, and let's go. Let's see what happens.
That's it, man. Well, I mean, I'm excited to hear it. I'm excited for it to come out. We'll definitely have to link back up when that comes out, and we'll absolutely have a beer and chat about that record. But man, it's been great getting to chat with you and getting to kind of learn about your career and that. It's been fun sharing a beer during this whole time too. And as we get ready to wrap up here, something I always like to ask people here on the show is kind of the final question. Do you, with all the shows you've done and all the touring you've done and everything, do you have for me a story of the best show you've ever done and the worst show you've ever done?
Oh, okay. The best, how X-rated can it be?
I love how that's the question. You know what? Let's go for it.
Okay.
Just go for it.
All right. So the best. Okay. So I've done a lot of really good ones. And there's a lot of people to thank for the really, really good ones. And one of the best ones ever was one of the Steel Panther gigs we did when we were opening for Steel Panther. And I want to say that we were in London that night. So we do the gig, and the gig was fun. And the next band, Diamonds, was on just before Panther. And so we come off stage, I put my guitars away, and I go to the merch table, and I'm selling T-shirts and stuff. And this really hot chick just comes up to me, and she was just like, "Hey, you guys were great." And I was like, "Thanks. Do you want to buy a T-shirt?" She said, "No, but do you want to do some MDMA?" And I'd never done MDMA before. And I was just like, I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's go. So we went to the bar, we grabbed her a couple of drinks, whatever. She gives me this pill, we take the M, and then she just leaves, right? She just left me. And I was just like, oh, okay. Well, I wonder what this is like. Well, I tell you, I had the greatest night of my life. Like, honestly, I had the greatest night of my life. I don't think I've ever hugged anybody so much in my life. I don't think I've told the boys that I've loved them so much in my life. It was the greatest. It was the greatest. And it also sold out to the max. So, like, that was incredible. You know, we played with two of my favorite bands ever. Yeah, it was just wild. Like, it was just wild. I got home at like 6 a.m. And yeah, it was just the wildest, wildest night. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. But then to contour that with the worst gig ever, oh man, I don't know. There's been a couple of roughies, but I would say that one of the toughest gigs I've ever done was in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island. And so we were doing this tour, and I think this was either 12 or 13, somewhere around there. And it was with a country rock band. And, we had done some pretty big gigs, and we had done some pretty big things. And we went out to Charlotte. Well, we did the whole East Coast. And we went to Charlottetown, and we played at this place called Fishbones. And it was like packed to the gills. There was like 400 people in there. And I'm like, holy Moses. I'm like, this is going to be the best night of the tour. Like 400 people, rock and roll. Let's do this, right? Well, we're tuning. We're like setting up, amps on stage, whatever. And this chick comes up to me and she's like, hey, can you guys do Wagon Wheel? And I'm like, yeah, we're not a cover band. Like we do like original music. And she's like, oh, well, the only bands that ever come here are like cover bands. And I'm like, yeah, well, we're like, it's Saturday night, lady. Like, we don't do covers, right? So we start playing, and, I swear to God, like, there was not a smile or a clap or an anything in the crowd. And we do about 2 or 3 songs literally to silence. And I was like, holy fuck. I'm like, tough crowd. So we trying to keep going with our set, and it was the worst. But then, like, you get so thrown off as a muso that you're like, man, like, am I really that bad? Like, so then everybody was in their own heads. And we literally knew one cover at the time. Like, we knew one cover. And it was a Florida Georgia Line cover of Cruise. Okay. There was a bad version of that bad song to begin with. All right. And so we, like, at some point I leaned over to Eric and I was just like, hey, let's do Cruise. So I kind of like signaled the guys. I was like, hey, let's do Cruise. We did Cruise. And the moment that we started it, everybody loved it and everybody sang and everybody jumped in. And then the moment that we went back to an original, it was just like crickets. And it was just the most disheartening experience because I'm like, man, like, usually, like, this is never this bad. Like, if you go to a bar and you see a band, that even if you don't like them, at least throw them a bone and just be
you're going to do something, even a golf clap.
But man, it was like, honestly, playing to like 400 crickets that night. It was the worst. It was so painful. And I tell you what, the moment that we were done our set, we packed up and we got the fuck out of Prince Edward Island. We were like, we are not hanging out here. We are not being seen. We are not going for breakfast in the morning. Let's just go back to Moncton where people enjoyed us, you know?
Yes. I have heard a lot of stories from people over the years of doing this podcast that PEI is a very strange place to play music.
I would imagine. Well, you know, you say that, like Maysides went out there a few years back and we had the best night of the tour.
Maybe it's just, I don't know. Maybe it's just that town or that bar, or I don't know. But I've heard similar stories before where like people think they're a cover band and it's like, oh, you're not playing songs we know.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, when Maysides went out there, I was smart enough to not book them at Fishbones because I was like, I had such a horrific experience.
Yeah, I'd never go back
before.
there.
I'm like, I'm not even going onto University Avenue. We're just going to boycott that whole street. We're just going to forget that whole experience, and that's going to be that.
It never happened.
Yeah, let's pretend it never happened, and that's that.
Oh my goodness, that's fantastic! I love that's one of my favorites. I think I've heard in a while. It's just playing to people who just don't give a shit.
Honestly, if they had tomatoes in the crowd, they would have thrown the tomatoes at us. Like it was that brutal. Like it was brutal. You know.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic, man. That's fantastic. Well, brother, it's been great getting to chat with you and getting to hear some stories, and that definitely will link up again when your record comes out. Maysides, please keep me in the loop. Where can people find you and the Maysides if they want to check you guys out?
That's every social media platform has everything, even Grindr. I'm sure we have a Grindr account. Yeah, I'm sure we have an OnlyFans. I know GI's on the OnlyFans. So, you know.
So there you go. When you get on the OnlyFans with exclusive content.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pictures of you with your guitar.
What's crazy about that, too, is like, in all seriousness for a second, and I'll delay this for an extra minute, but OnlyFans started as like artists and bands.
Yes.
Right? As a thing for them to release music to actual fans.
Yes.
And then it just got taken over by Suicide Girls.
Yeah, and now it's just, you can't even, like, I know someone who, they're on OnlyFans for their art, and they make a good amount of money on there.
Sure they do.
But they don't tell anyone there, because it's a girl, and she says, I can't tell my family that I'm making basically a livable wage on OnlyFans selling actual art.
I know.
Because, oh my God, my little girl's on OnlyFans. It's like, no, like, I'm not showing people my butthole. I'm painting pictures and stuff, and like it's crazy.
It's a wild time, man. I mean, good on them. You know what? Good
for sure. Yeah, no shame. Yeah.
No shame. You know, I mean, they've made a lot of money out of me. Full disclosure. You know. You know, because I mean, whatever. Like, you know what? Like, it's ethical. You know what? I mean, they're putting it on there. I'll pay for it.
You're helping to pay the rent. It's fine. It's all good.
Exactly. You know,
it's all good.
So yeah, but anyway, brother, it's been great. Thank you for having me. We could do this until 3:00 in the morning. If it was but yeah, man, thank you. I'll keep you in the loop with everything, and then we'll move forward from there.
For sure. Sounds great, brother. Thanks so much, Ken.
Cheers, mate.
All right, folks, there you have it. My chat with Kenny Holt from the Maysides. Definitely a great time chatting with Kenny. Be sure to keep it locked here onto the Harder Show for some upcoming stuff from the Maysides, as well as Kenny's solo record. Very much looking forward to that. Kenny, thanks so much for coming on, man, and being a great hang. But thank you guys so very much for tuning in. I hope that you guys will take a second to check out the Maysides, because they definitely deserve your support. And while you're at it, take a second to drop a like or a subscribe or a follow right here to The Harder Show. We, of course, have Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and as well as you got the YouTube, you got Spotify, you got the Anchor, you got the Apple Podcasts. We are now, I forgot to mention this in the intro, officially on Audible, which is really, really cool because, Audible's a fantastic app, and I'm very blessed, #blessed, to be on Audible. Very excited about that, as well as Amazon Music. So if you guys are users of Audible or Amazon Music, you can now find The Harder Show on there as of like a couple of days ago. So be sure to subscribe to me on there. Regardless of how you listen to this podcast, if you can, please leave a rating, especially if it's a 5-star rating, if you really enjoyed this chat here today or some chats I've had in the past. If you've ever enjoyed this show and it's given you some entertainment, leaving a rating really, really helps this show grow. And especially with Spotify, I've noticed my Spotify numbers going up as I get ratings. So just take a second. 5-star ratings really help this show grow on the charts and help more people find this show and discover great music like the Maysides, like Drop Top Alibi, and so many others that I've had on the show, as well as great podcasters and entertainers and just fun everyday people. So when you support this show, you're not only supporting me, but you're really supporting the Ontario scene for music, because I like to, of course, cover a lot of Ontario bands and as well as a lot of other different creators, because I believe in, I have people on that I think are interesting and that I think deserve to tell their story, and that I think in the past, if they've told their story, it hasn't been done justice. So that's kind of what I like to do here, and just have them on and have a coffee or have a beer and just have a conversation with them. So I very much appreciate your support for myself and for everyone that I have had and will have on this podcast. And if you'd like to go a step further in supporting this podcast, consider joining the Patreon. That's right, the Patreon, patreon.com/The Harder Show. Find a tier that is right for you to get exclusive access to a bunch of fun stuff depending on the tier that you are at, as well as a personalized shout out, just like my Hodheads, my man, Mr. Scotty D, supporter of this podcast basically from day one, and a dear friend of mine for the last, what did I say last week? I don't even know. Since like grade 7, 8, so it's been a long time. And Scotty, I appreciate your friendship and your support, brother. You know how much I love you. Big shout outs to my man Scotty D, and as well, big shout outs to the entirety of the Grey Rooms team for all of their support of this podcast, and also, of course, for being patrons of this podcast. They were the reason that I hit my goal in a huge monthly patronage that they did. So I cannot thank them enough for supporting this podcast. It really, truly means the world to me. And that you guys support my creative project here, because I'm such a fan of the Grey Rooms and such a fan of all the human beings over there as well. More importantly, some fantastic people over there at the Grey Rooms. And if you're even remotely into audio dramas or horror related content, kind of uncomfortable, spooky content, go check out the Grey Rooms. It is my favorite podcast, and it was my favorite podcast before they were patrons. So go ahead and check that out. And if you would like a little shout out like that, just go ahead and join the Harder Show Patreon. Joining the $1 a month tier will get you a shout in every single episode of the show. And if you leave a little message of something you want me to say or whatever, I'll even do that. So check that out. And then we have a couple other tiers as well if you want to give a little more support and get some behind the scenes content and bonus content, which I'm going to be launching at the end of this month. So very much looking forward to that. And I am very much looking forward to doing the upgrade that I'm going to be doing as well in the next week. So a lot of cool things happening here on The Harder Show. And I can't thank you guys enough for all of the support. Give you the old patented exclusive to The Harder Show, at least as far as I know, audio fist bump. See, what happened there was, I'm going to leave that in because I gave my microphone the fist bump, as I normally do, and it actually fully just turned the microphone around. Apparently, my little clip wasn't tight enough, so that's what happened there. This is the kind of quality you can expect here at The Harder Show after 327 episodes. Oh, boy. But anyway, thank you guys so very much for tuning in and listening, especially if you're still listening. If you're still listening to this right now, like seriously, you are the best to listen all the way through to the end and all through all my housekeeping and things of that nature. Go check out the Maysides. Go check out the Grey Rooms. If you see Scotty D walking down the street, give him a hug for me. all that fun stuff. And thank you so very much. Sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a like if you can, leave a rating if you can, help this show grow. And I'll catch you next time on The Harder Show. Take it easy, guys.